not get the time to ask the question. Just raise your hand. I will watch over the room, and when you will ask the question, wait, the mic will come to you because we have streaming of our session. So, and tell who you are and whom you are addressing the question. Is it okay? Yeah, okay. Steven, the floor is yours. If you want to tell more about yourself, please go ahead.
That's okay. Thanks for coming today and for inviting us to do this talk. So we're just two reporters, and this was a big team effort. There was a number of other colleagues from Reuters involved in the Moscow bureau and other places, and in London, and also other colleagues that we collaborated with, including a reporter from Ukraine, Sevgil Musaiva, who's not here today. But we're glad just to present it, and I was very, very lucky to work with Roman, who I really think is a brilliant reporter. So what we're going to do is, as you were saying, please just interrupt. Let us sort of say a little bit about what we're doing and what set the stall, but otherwise the whole point of this is to share some of the methods and ways of doing things and discuss those. So we don't know what is of particular interest to you, so it's for you to interrupt and put your hand up so that we can expand on the particular pieces of this that would be of interest to you. So this is a series of articles that were published last year. I think there were about 8 or 9 articles in all, and the idea was to look at the friends of Putin, look at the Kremlin system, and to see, we knew already that some of the elite people close to the President of Russia have got fabulously wealthy during his time. But the question was, how exactly does this happen? And what is the mechanism for this skimming of money from the taxpayer, if you like? And also, what is the impact on ordinary Russian citizens? So we were focusing on the actual state programs, not capturing of firms and all the sort of looting that took place in the 90s, but the real taxpayers' money that was appears to be diverted. There were a number of stories, some about health, some about railways, some about the sale of rockets to America, sale of gas to Ukraine, and generally about the use of middlemen in the importation deals. So quite a lot of stories, and we'll just sort of flip through some of them and concentrate particularly on a couple of stories. One about the sale of the import of health equipment for the Putin's prize Project Health, and secondly on the Russian railway system, which is a huge money-spending machine because, as you can imagine, the railway network in Russia is immense. So just to headline some of the techniques, which you can ask us more about, and we will just cover as we go through, but just so to set it all out, we're talking about setting out the story, identifying the subject for investigation. I said thinking in the language of the subject. That means understanding the environment you're in, how businesses actually do operate in Russia and in the place where you are, so you can start thinking about how to approach the story. Getting hold of the data. We used huge amounts of data in this project, and it wasn't just a case of filing a freedom of information request. It was actually finding sources who would give us that information, but sometimes it was public data. Attacking the big data, which means organizing that and using some sort of technical skills sometimes for that. Finding insiders, people who would corroborate and tell you more about, to explain the story that you can find in the data. Proving the evidence, and also thinking about security, because as you know, particularly for sources, it can be a difficult environment, to put it mildly, in Russia. Do you want to just say anything to start off with?
Yeah, I mean, talking about techniques, why I like this kind of series we did is that, in my point of view, it was investigation in its pure sense. I mean, journalism investigation. So it was always the mixture of secret data and public data, of sources and contracts which you can get online. We got, I mean, plenty of data which we couldn't publish because it was not official. We got it from unofficial sources, and we, you know, we always thought how we're gonna prove this unofficial data. So it was, you know, kind of mixture from people to databases, from secret one to public one, and that's actually how we did it.
Okay. So we're looking particularly at the people around President Putin. This is the this photograph here is the quite a famous dacha complex outside St. Petersburg, the Ozero Lake Cooperative, where some of Putin's friends and Putin himself had dachas. And this is a guy called Vladimir Yakunin, who until very recently was the head of Russian railways and very close to Putin. And this is Nikolai Shamalov, who was a former KGB and also a shareholder of Bank Russia. And this is his partner, former KGB Colonel Dmitry Gorelov. Now, we want to know, I mean, are these people really close to Putin or not? You know, to what extent can they really be called his friends? Well, on the health front, one of the things that led us to that conclusion was a flight. This is a flight plan of a flight to Sochi in 2008. And among the people on there, Roman, perhaps you can say what?
Well, first of all, I mean, this is important because this document we got from a source, and we can name him now, actually. This is Boris Nemtsov, a politic, who was recently killed in Russia. And you see here that we got a flight document showing that all of them are flying together. So Kabayeva is considered, or at least was, as we believe, Putin's girlfriend. And now all of his friends are traveling with her to Sochi, if I'm not mistaken, to a place, or Krasnodar region, where Putin now has a big palace.
So not only Gorelov and Shamalov that we just mentioned, but also this guy Vladimir Kozhin, who was then the head of the Presidential
Affairs Department.
Right. So people close into the president, you can see how these are not sort of disconnected business people; they're very close. So what do we find out about them? Just to summarize the whole investigation, because we're not going to go into every detail, just pick on some things. We looked at the Putin friends. We looked at a database. We knew that they ran a company that imported health equipment, and that company won a contract to import health equipment for a big federal health program, Project Health. And we then we found a database of imports, and we discovered a middle company, an intermediary company that had not been published before, that was being at the center of the imports of this health equipment. We then got hold of bank records, which showed, we found a source who actually could tell all about this and provide context to that data, discovered that the company was owned secretly through Virgin Islands and all the rest of it by Gorelov and Shamalov. And Shamalov actually at the time was also an executive of Siemens. And then we followed up with reaction by going to everybody involved to seek their confirmation. Now the key thing which Roman got hold of, which was to find this intermediary. And one of the sources we've used to do that work is customs records, customs data, which was very helpful in exposing things that hadn't been public, which was the sort of the hidden part of the transaction. The public thing is Russia to build new hospitals with the latest equipment. The Siemens chairman comes to Moscow, announces the deal. The subcontractor is announced, Petromed in St. Petersburg. But what's really going on here, Roman, perhaps you want to explain, because we'll just jump forward to this one.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole thing started with our research in the customs database, and we found that, you know, I like this term, which Stephen used, which is sandwich economy. So instead of buying directly from Siemens, they were buying from a company from the UK. You can see it, its name is Great Hill, and
coming here, there you are.
Yep. And of course, the price was infiltrated. So I mean, you know, they like made 50% on from each contract. But we knew that we can't use actually this data from the customs database because it's kind of unofficial. And that is when we went to the source, Sergei Kolesnikov. He is the guy who used to work in the Putin's inner circle, and he was partner of Shamalov and Gorelov. But in 2009, he decided to leave Russia, and he was the guy who actually gave the interview about the Putin's palace in Krasnodar region for a cost of $1 billion. And we came to him with this data because we knew that he might know something, and he was the one who provided us with very important stuff to prove what we actually saw in the customs.
I mean, he's an example of a source that's been out there already. He's already told a story, but you should not give up on going back to the same old people, because he, for various reasons, he'd not spoken about what we thought was an even more important story, more up to date. A very clear trail, which he also had evidence of, and which we later also got bank records to back up. And this is what it showed, that there's the company at the top, Petromed, that's buying the equipment. Publicly, they're buying it directly from Siemens, but in fact, they buy it from this company, Great Hill, which is based in the UK. It's just a fake company, a shell company, right? And they then, in turn, they are buying the equipment at a high price, double what's actually being paid to Siemens. So 50% of the money is being taken to one side. And that money flows to a company, La Naval, which I recall is registered in...
the US, no?
No, in some strange jurisdiction, and Guam or somewhere. But the bank account is in Switzerland. And then from there, we could then follow money being paid to an accountant for a contract to build nothing other than the palace 100 miles from Sochi, built for, we are told, for Vladimir Putin.
So actually, what happened, they ripped off the Russian budget, the Russian population, and the money they earned, they used to build the palace for president.
So just, can I interrupt you for a while? To sum up, you did the reconstruction of the money flow, but you had started with just looking for the connections between people involved in the scheme, and then you used unofficial records, and you had been looking for the whistleblowers or insiders that might prove this information, and then the system was set up as it is shown on this slide. Am I correct?
That's right.
Yeah, just to sum up. There is a question. Can we have the mic to the guy on the left side?
Do you want to actually do that? Would that be easier? Then you can move around.
Just hold on. Mic is coming. There.
Esquarro from Finland. Sorry, I didn't understand. Why did you consider the...
Just tell who you are and whom you are addressing the question.
I don't know which one of them is the best to answer this, but Esquarro from Finland. And my question is, I didn't quite understand when you said customs records were not actually official. What did you mean by that?
Well, look, I mean, the information from the customs database is considered to be not secret, but confidential. So you can't, I mean, if you send a request to the customs service, they say, no, we can't give you anything because, you know, it's confidential.
This is not public information by the law.
Exactly.
So it was obtained from a source. We believed it. We believed in the source, but at the same time, we still wanted to verify, and we went to great lengths to verify that these transactions that we saw in the database, and particularly the prices, because the prices were crucial to the money flow, to see how essentially they were buying at inflated prices compared to what Siemens was actually originally selling. And we found this was very typical of big Western companies selling in Russia, that they were prepared to accept offshore intermediaries in order to sell. They announced these deals publicly, but they never announced the secret element of the deal, because they're not really selling directly to Russia, they're selling to these offshores who are taking a slice of the money.
So what we actually had to do, we had to verify the proof.
I have another question about actually this customs register. Is there any customs register if it would import it via Finland border from the Finland side?
Yeah, there would be information in the customs database.
Did you try to reach this information or
well, we're going to go
verify?
on, if permit me, we'll say a bit more about combining other databases, because we're going to go on a bit to explain about what we did on the gas to Ukraine, where we took the Ukrainian customs and the Russian customs and used them together to follow the whole money trail. So we can hold that one a little bit.
Sorry, I forgot to ask you. I had a previous question about the previous slide about the flight plan.
Yeah.
The last three names seem to be misspelled Finnish names. Did you actually investigate?
Well, we know who they are. They're the flight crew of the...
That's just the flight crew. Okay.
The plane belonged, by the way, to Timchenko, as you know, a very reputable Finnish citizen. But yeah, but they were written down by some Russian customs official, so the spelling is not necessarily correct. Okay, let's do one more, and then we can always come back. Go on.
Yeah, please, Ian.
Hi, Anne Cope from Transparency International. I'm just interested whether you put these findings back to Siemens, or I don't know if your story has been finished, or whether you put it back to Siemens and whether you got any response at all, basically from their collusion in this, in these sales.
Yeah, well, that's your sort of sum up, not mine. But they did confirm they did not know. At the time, Shamolov was the regional sales director for Siemens, so they had someone who was quite politically connected, employed as their sales director, who was already established as having been involved in this dacha with Putin. So this guy, Shamolov, negotiated the deal, and they said that they were not aware that this company that they were dealing with, Greytil, was owned by, partly owned by their own sales executive. Apart from that, they essentially refused to comment. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And but as you know, they've been faced a lot of investigation and criticism over being involved in these kind of intermediaries. And since then, of course, they've said that they've made a lot of changes and reforms to how they carry out the use of these intermediaries, but we'll have a little bit more on that in a second. Let's just move on. We can come back to any of this towards the end, but we'll just mention the second sort of story we did, which is actually part 3 of the series, which was about the Russian railway system and how Russian Railways was paying billions of dollars into the hands of secret private companies. I found this a really interesting investigation, and it was one of the stories I'm most proud of having done, although actually in terms of its reaction was quite small, but that seems to be Russia. Perhaps Roman can talk about that. But just to sum up the whole story and what we did in the rounds, it started with, we were interested in Russian railways because of its connection, as I mentioned, to Yakunin. And then we spotted this guy, Golbuntsov. He was a Russian banker who was shot in London, 12 times with a Makarov. He survived. And he'd been interviewed, we noticed, a few times, and had mentioned that what he was doing was exposing a scandal at Russian railways. But no one had explored that element of the story. And when we approached him, he revealed that he'd brought out of Russia a laptop with all the transactions of 2 banks that he ran for 3 years, a huge database. And so we took that and also his sort of testimony about what went on and started to analyze that. And we also looked at public, but we didn't know whether we could believe it or not. Had he meddled with the data? You know, we needed to do all kinds of verifications to check what he said was correct. We combined that with the examination of public tenders. Russia has, I believe still, has been quite open in publishing an awful lot of information about public procurement. And that allowed us to examine the way that Russian railways provided tenders.
Well, not everywhere. Now they are closing the land register because of our investigation. So, but public, yeah, the procurement database is still active. And we've got this, actually the laptop with, information. I mean, it was a SQL database, and it was about 2 banks which were controlled by Gorbachev and his partners. And actually, these were millions and millions of transactions, which actually allowed us to prove how the money spent on construction of railways was spent. And I mean, even I was, surprised when I saw it, because I mean, before I got this database, I believed that 30% of money is stolen and 70 is used on some real job. It appeared that everything is vice versa. 70% of money was stolen. It went to shell companies which never did any job, and then it went offshore or was made cash or whatever, and just 30% was used on proper work, on construction.
And we have a rule at Reuters that if you mention anybody, you have to go and approach them, whoever they are. Even if it's an obscure shell company, some person you think is fake, you still have to try to find them. And all I'd say is that in this investigation, that approach of going to absolutely everybody, to taking it to the final degree, produced a huge benefit. It's difficult to say precisely how, but without revealing sources, except to say that we knocked on dozens of doors in Moscow, looking to every single company that was mentioned and every sort of individual we trace. And it is amazing who will talk to you. You always think, the guy won't talk to you, but there was one scene with there was one final scene with we'll talk about it in a sec, but what was the sources I've mentioned already? Tender searches, the company analysis. We knocked on all the addresses. What we found was a pattern of ownership that was quite similar. These in the center here are the main some of the main railway contractors that we found, and we found they all had a common pattern of ownership.
So an important thing, I mean, usually, there were like 20 of companies, and all of them pretended to be different, but when we checked them, when we checked the addresses, shareholders, directors, or whatever, we found actually that all of these 20 companies are controlled by the same person. And when they bid against each other, it's clear that it's a fake bid, because this is the bid of two companies controlled by the same person.
And you can see that there's a common pattern here by the way that the ownership structure. This is the actual companies are then owned in turn by a shareholding company, also Russian companies, and then in turn controlled by particular individuals. And there were similar structures like that, and we just knocked on all these and tried to find all these people. And in many cases, they were using people whose identity had been taken. You want to talk about one of those cases, just as an example? It's quite common in Russia, where you found someone you found
a woman with a fake passport.
Yeah.
What we did in our research, in order to prove that company is fake, because okay, why do you think that the company is fake? We actually used the techniques which are used by the Russian tax agency. So the tax agency has a kind of signals or signs, which show that the company is fake. And we use the same technique. So let us say the shareholder is simultaneously a shareholder in 500 other companies. It's one of the signs that the company is fake. If the company does not exist on the address listed in the corporate documents, it's another sign of being fake. And one of the most important is that if the director of the company, the one listed in the documents, says that I know nothing about the company, it's another good sign of company being fake. And what we did actually, we went to all these directors of these companies which received money and talked to them. And we talked to a daughter whose mom was actually a shareholder in one of the companies, or I don't remember, in 20 companies. And she said, well, of course, you're not the first one who comes to me. Like, tax officials and law enforcement comes to us, each month asking about these companies. But my mother has never been a shareholder or director in any company, because she's not living in Russia anymore, to be honest. And it was cool, okay, the company got huge amounts of money, but the shareholder and director does not even live in Russia, and they're poor people, they know nothing. They're so-called nominees,
The highlight for me was knocking on another door of another owner of a company. And bear in mind, these companies were getting huge amounts of money. Up to half a billion dollars of federal contracts, from a state agency. And you look for the company, and it's an abandoned or flat or in the middle of nowhere in a public housing. That is their headquarters, the official headquarters of this company, right? They're all hidden. And one of the guys there, he says, you know, he opens the door in this rundown apartment building in his underwear. And he says, do you own the company? Yeah, I do. But it's just a big money laundering operation. That was useful to know.
I would add that there is another sign of companies faked that we used in Ukraine. In case on the same physical address, hundreds of companies are registered. And you can just trace it and see that in case on the same apartment, usually apartment is used, 500 companies are registered in the same apartment. Okay. That means that this is a kind of proxy.
Right. So here you have a kind of suspicious situation. Lots of money going to kind of companies that appear dubious in their way they go. And then, of course, people can say, well, there's a lot of dubious stuff going on. But what's really going on here? That's when we start tracing the money and trying to analyze what's actually happening here. What's the real story
Just
behind?
to add with the guy, I mean, another cool thing with him was that he received about $100 per month just for, you know, answering the phone calls. So his task was, if somebody calls you and asks you, are you directing the company? You should reply, yes, I am. That was all his job.
So the pattern we found from analyzing corporate information and tender records was companies that claimed to be different were actually the same company, or at least appeared to have very close connections. So coordinated bids in order to get the contract into the hands of the people controlled by insiders. So here's an example. Two companies that were always bidding against each other for huge amounts of money. Together they won $500 million, okay? Now they're supposed to be different companies, but isn't it strange that they were both founded on the same day by the same guy, and they opened a bank account on the same day, and even for some crazy reason even didn't bother to change the number of employees that they registered in their annual report. So 127 employees, 127 employees, 138 there, 138 there.
They might have part-time job in both companies.
Yeah? And they were the only bidders in 43 different tender competitions. Common ownership, won't go into all that, too complicated, but there's a lot of things connect them. And then we have the databases. Two banks, millions of transactions, but we needed to check it out. This is now we're inside the database, the banking databases, tracking all the movements of money, and we see they're all starting to pay all different companies, supposed to be different, but they're all paying money into the same companies inside the bank. So what they're doing is the money is starting to come together from different different shell companies. They're not fake, but they're shell. They are nominee companies. It's a complicated system, but basically what the bank is doing is creating what is called a whirl. It's designed to mix up all the money and kind of hide where it goes. But there's and the money was described by Gorbunsov as a whirlpool, and you can actually see this whirlpool. The money goes in, goes around, and then it starts just flowing round and round and round. And his description is when the real client actually wants the money, they just take it from the nearest place that they can find it.
Yeah, I mean, an important thing here, because, I mean, usually, you know, in general, when we do investigations, let us say conflict of interest or fake bids, whatever, we always miss the main question. I mean, what happened to the money? Because, you know, to get the banking statement is very difficult. Here we got, like, banking statements of all the companies involved in the fraud. But an important thing is that, you know, we thought that, okay, if 30% of money is spent on some real job and 70% of money is stolen, then we will find, you know, like, in the end, after 4 or 5 layers, we'll find a real company or a real physical person who gets the money. And we were wrong, actually. Because the system is created in a way where the money, you know, like spins around, and I mean, guys don't care. When we asked Gorbachev, I mean, why the system is so complicated, he said, well, I mean, because I mean, we do that in order to make impossible to find the trail, first of all, and secondly, this is just my pocket, you know, and I don't care whether to put it here or here or here, and it's always, you know, this kind of circle, and you will never find this direct trail to beneficiary.
Right, but what you did find, if you imagine this is the Russian railways paying the money to the contractor, there's the big sum, 23 billion rubles, is that in the first instance they do pay money to real companies, real subcontractors, right? And what's happening there is that they are actually paying, the guys that do the work are getting a bit of the money, and all the rest is going into this big whirlpool. You can see that we looked at it in a very particular case, a 2.4 billion rail project, which is a high-profile Putin project to connect Finland with St. Petersburg. And there was one main contractor, again with headquarters in a one-room apartment in Moscow. But there we saw a very clear picture where about 1/3 of the money we could trace was going to actual subcontractors who did the work, and 2/3 going into this whirlpool. And an example of that, how we could trace the money flowing through, was the way in which they changed the purpose of the payments. And you could see that the way that the payments were not, as you followed it through the bank, were not for real purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, Russian law enforcement and law enforcement in any place in the world, they have kind of techniques when they can prove and say that this is money laundering. And one of the most important things is that when they change the purpose of the payment, let us say, if I'm doing construction and I'm receiving money for, I don't know, for materials or construction materials or whatever, and then what I do, I send money for, I don't know, some shitty stuff like, baby kits or whatever, nothing which has to do with construction. And we have a perfect example, we had a kind of perfect example here. Do we have Lego here?
It's coming up, yeah. Just to say, the funny thing there is you see that the way they divide up the money and they move it on from one company to the next inside this sort of money laundering chain, and they gradually change the purpose of the thing. So when you start off, here you are paying money to do the actual work on the Finland line, and fun enough, I think Roman is pretty good with the calculator. He added two payments together, came up with this 644 million ruble payment and 8 kopecks, right? And it divides actually into two payments, but actually comes together here, again, as exactly the same sum, which if they were genuine business payments for genuine contracts, it's kind of surprising that they would all add up to the same exact 10-figure sum. But originally it's railway work, and gradually it's for other things, and by the end they're paying for soft furnishing and all kinds of stuff. And this is all happening within the space of, 2 days. The money just moves all the way through. And this was the funniest one that you found. You can see how it moves forward. The banks just go in and out. They're not normal businesses. They're not normal accounts. And one of the ways of determining that, and it's a classic thing used by fraud investigators, by US prosecutors, etc., is that the accounts zero out. A normal business is not going to just, all the money it gets in is not going to go out the next day. And these are the prime contractors, the main people who are receiving the money, the official contractors for Russian railways, getting the money, and it goes out the next day. And this was do you want to say what happened here? That was the...
Yeah, so, what we show, it's a clear example of what they call transit. So you receive 5 rubles and you send 5 rubles. You make no profit. You do that because you don't want to pay taxes. And, you transit money and you steal money. And we were, we took just one day, one project, and we tried to identify what happened to the money. And as Stephen said, in the beginning it was construction, and then the purpose of the payment is changing, like for furniture or whatever, and then in the end, look, it comes to Lego. So the company which received money for construction is suddenly buying huge amounts of Lego kits, on how much? On millions or hundreds of millions of rubles. I can't imagine, you can build another Moscow if you buy, such amounts of Lego, actually. And it's clear that the company never existed at that address. It was a fake company. And it's clear, it's a good proof that this is money laundering.
But I'm sad to say we don't have worldwide subpoena power because the trail for us ended in the Baltic countries, in Latvia, Estonia, and that sort of thing. So a lot of money coming out of the system, but we wish we could tell you that we traced it all the way to some property being built in Hyde Park. But maybe that will come when new sources come forward. And because time is limited, I will just, we've explained these points to you already, just quickly mention about a final, or another story we did there, which was about gas going to Ukraine. And I think I'd like to mention that particularly because it shows the possibilities for collaboration and cooperation, because we were marrying together data from 2 different countries. The customs data that Roman was able to get hold of in Russia, and other customs data that we could get hold of in Ukraine. And the background to this is that Putin announced that he was giving cheap gas to Ukraine to help out Ukraine. This was before he had invaded the country. This was going back when this man on the left, Yanukovych, was still in charge. And this is the guy who received a lot of the gas. He's a businessman called Dmitry Firtash. What we had was the same custom records that you've seen before, but there's a story there, because as it emerged, when we looked at the Gazprom's sales to Ukraine, you saw that the gas was going to Ukraine, but the money was coming from Switzerland, from a company called Oskem, but registered in Switzerland and Cyprus. So there was an intermediary. And what we were able to see there, I think this is, if I click it, maybe it will come in there. You can see the prices there. Do you see that on the left-hand side, the importer of the gas is Naftogaz Ukraine. That's the official state company. But the private businessman is getting the gas for there's $3.90 is the price for Naftogaz, but $2.69 is the company controlled by Firtash, and getting it this super cheap gas, okay? But the key thing was, we could see that the gas was being sold cheap, but it wasn't being sold cheap to Ukraine. It was being sold to Cyprus and Switzerland, to these intermediaries. And that's how there was and then it was being resold back to Ukraine at the same high price as the state company was paying. So what you have is an offshore rake-off.
So what was important to prove that, you know, when the whole thing in Kiev started, I mean the revolution, you know, Putin was saying that we back up the people in Ukraine and we are selling, you know, them the cheap gas. But the truth is that he actually backed up the billionaire, the businessman, but not the people of Ukraine, because the state-owned company, Naftogaz, was still paying high price for gas. And Firtash, the private company, was paying much, much less. And you know, if you can make $100 from 100 cubic meters, or 100,000 cubic meters, and the deals are about millions of cubic meters, then just one deal makes you a billionaire, actually.
The sums involved are huge. And to say what enabled you to follow the money trail and to see the prices and the price differential, to see the profit that was being made offshore, was to take custom records of the gas coming into Ukraine, which gave the import price into Ukraine, which was high, and the export from Russia prices, which were low. So you see the Russian taxpayers losing out because the gas is sold cheaper than they could actually get from importing it into Ukraine. So those were our stories. I think that, what do you think? We had a lot of other work on all the time this sort of sandwich technique, Russian procurement, finding the middle companies and following the money flow. Just to quickly show you one slide about, which we did a very broad subject, a broad look at the use of middlemen, which a colleague of mine, Tom Bergen, did, looking through the same custom records. You could see there that these are the major multinationals. There's Philips, Siemens, General Electric, Toshiba. Some of them have been sort of shamed about the use of intermediaries, because intermediaries may just be used for some sort of tax reason, but there's a big risk in the use of these intermediaries that you don't know who's really behind them, and the money's being used to siphon off, the money can be siphoned off as effectively as a form of bribery. And there are many cases where they are basically vehicles for bribery. We can't show that in every case. We don't even believe it's the case always. But some companies, there's General Electric, they had a little internal scandal, and all of a sudden, the blue line here is the percentage of sales that go to Russia through offshore intermediaries, and this is the total number of sales. So the gap is the number that is sold directly into Russia, and you can see General Electric drop right down. But other companies, as you can see, still almost half of what they sell is still being sold through these mystery companies that you will very rarely see mentioned publicly. Okay, so thanks very much. We've just sort of run through everything.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for the questions. I have the question to you. The slide that showed two companies registered at the same date with the same person, with the same bank account that were competing in one bid. Is this by the Russian law a violation of the state procurement or public procurement legislation? And the question is whether you tried to approach the law enforcing agencies and what was their reaction on this,
well,
on these facts that you revealed.
First of all, fake bids, of course, is violation. I mean, it's not a question of criminal procedures, but you know, it's something which is overseen by so-called FAS, the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service in Russia. No, we didn't. I mean, we didn't ask them to start any investigation or whatever, because as I believe, it's not the job of reporters to write complaints.
The question is not to ask them to start investigation, but to ask them, have you seen this? Because as I understand, that's their duty to check whether the state procurement bids are run in a proper way.
We asked a whole load of different authorities for reaction. We didn't get any interest from any of them. I mean, Russian Railways itself is a victim of this, and they did not respond, except to say that they had thoroughly audited everyone involved. The big problem with you see there what looks plainly like money laundering, but as I just heard a Swiss colleague describe, in money laundering law in the West, you have to prove a crime, that the money has come from a crime, predicate crime. Now, in the US, for example, rigging contracts is a crime, so it would be money laundering to have money that came from that source. Having said that, it's very difficult when Russian authorities never, or very rarely, prosecute in these cases, unless when you have a situation where this activity is tolerated in Russia and they're not prosecuted, then following the money trail as it flows into Europe and America and elsewhere, for example, is quite difficult because there isn't that predicate crime. What you have instead is a sort of ethical problem.
And the thing is that, you know, I mean, they just don't want to investigate these kind of things because we showed you the laptop with the databases of two banks, which we use. And actually, the law enforcement had the same laptop, like they got it half a year before us, and they did nothing.
Okay.
I mean, they got it not from us, but from the source.
Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Kjetil Stormark. I run two investigative projects, one focusing on extremist groups, another one focused on national security, and where Russia plays a part somewhat. I'm just curious, could you say a little more about the methods you used on working sources to get access to information not readily available in the public domain, bank records and so forth? And another question related to what kind of analytical software you might have used in analyzing your material.
Okay. You want to do the first, I'll do the second?
Yeah, as for the sources. Well, I don't think that we have something new, you know, in Russia in terms of dealing with sources. So, I mean, in general, my point is that, you know, my best sources are not high-profile people, but low-profile people, those who have access to different databases in all kind of different agencies. And they help us, and they help me just because they respect the work we do, and because sometimes they see that, you know, nothing is done by the authorities, and that's how they do. I mean, yes, they're afraid, but, you know, they're quite... I mean, of course, we have, you know, some security things we follow. I don't want to talk about them because, you know, it comes to sources. But I mean, the main thing is just to bring to build some kind of trust, so that you know that everything they share with you is it's only for public interest, and you will not misuse it actually. I mean, nothing new. I think that all of you, you know, do the same.
Oh, yeah, I would only say about sources. People have a lot of, you know, discussion about how to find sources or develop them, whatever. But I'd say the main thing is, you know, this, you know, shoe leather. You know, it's just actually knocking on doors. And actually, the amount of people, the trouble we have sometimes in, you know, explain to people that actually you just need to go out and knock on a door and go and meet people and not, you know, not send them endless emails or phone calls. Just actually go and meet people face to face, and that's how you find sources. And the most unexpected people will be your help. You know, every organization is divided in the world. There's always people inside those organizations that will help you. It's quite surprising. In terms of analytical tools, well, we had this database that came in a laptop. Behind it was a database built in Microsoft SQL, and we took that out and put it up on our own server and sort of reconstructed that so we could do some analysis of that. We have some data people, data reporters who were brilliant on that, helping us to redo it. But the database ultimately was quite simple. Although the text was in Russian, the field names of the database were in English. And we also used a kind of, there's a program called Analyst Notebook, which is can map out relationships, but I think there's quite a lot of public source, open source software that can do similar things, but because I had that already, I used that to sort of plot out the movements of money. So those are and of course Excel spreadsheets just to calculate all the import prices and make sense of the customs data.
There is a question here in the first row.
Thank you, Mr. Microphone Person.
Thank you.
Per Anders Johansen, I'm the correspondent of Aftenposten in Moscow. Roman, can you tell a little bit about the aftermath of this, your stories? These stories were spread a lot in the West, but how did it go with the spreading of your story in Russia, and how did you work about to get your fantastic stories out to the Russian public?
Well, this story was very popular in Russia, and it was actually the whole series was republished by everybody, I would say, by all major media, and I would say that I didn't see it even before, because I mean some big newspapers like RBC Daily, they just took the whole series and retold it to their audience, which they never do usually, actually. So it went quite well. Of course, I mean it was not broadcasted on TV or on other on radio. Actually, it was as well, but it was not on TV because TV is state controlled and they will never show something like this. But no, it went. I mean, it made a very big noise. But the problem is that there were no any decisions made.
So the main Russian approach to these kind of revelations is to maintain absolute silence.
Exactly.
In response.
Exactly. We have a rule: if we publish a story and everybody is silent, then we kicked it. So then we are right.
More question, Drew.
So you explained these friends of Putin who are working together, but explain to me. I mean, what's actually the structure of Putin's inner circle? I mean, how does it actually work? Are these all people that are that he uses, or are they actually his friends? I mean, how does it actually work?
Well, look, I mean, Lenin said that if you want to make a revolution, you need to get control over radio, railways, and I don't remember what was the third one.
Banks and bridges.
Yeah, Putin does the same actually, but not for revolution, but for making money. So his friends are controlling, I mean, Rotenbergs and Timchenko construct all the roads in Russia. So, they are controlling one field. Kovalchuk control all the media, so which is another field. Timchenko used to be, and he is still important, controls the oil trading. Sechin controls the oil producing. So his friends, are overseeing each lucrative market in Russia. So every single big market in Russia is controlled by Putin's friends. And what is also interesting that sometimes they quarrel because, they want to get control over another market, and then that's where the wars start, But actually Putin's idea is that no, if you build roads, you should not go into media because this is Kovalchuk. If you sell oil, you should not go into, into bridges because this is not your business. So I believe that's actually how it works.
And there's a sort of bargain here, isn't there? That these are friends that he trusts, and that means that they have to actually deliver these services. I mean, these railways do get built at an extortionate cost, but they are being built. So there's a combination of people that he genuinely trusts to kind of get the job done, but appear, according to what we're seeing, at least in the cases we've looked at, to be able to extract quite a large dividend, or tolerate a very large dividend being taken out of them.
So we are talking about this huge empire that actually has some branches even in Ukraine, because My question is whether Firtash just got the money or raised the money with these murky schemes, or these money were coming back to hidden accounts or whatever.
Well, you know, the answer is we don't know. We know that Firtash is very close to the Russians, but we know there's many allegations about how Firtash has used money, as you know, in Ukraine and the political system there. But you know, a lot of that is unproven, and I would actually at this point mention the work of OCCRP as well, which Roman has been involved in as well, but in following many different money laundering trails, and this whole pattern, which we can show, and they have shown on numerous occasions of money trails, of actual systems of money laundering being run by various bankers on behalf of some of these people, mixing up all the money, and it is proving extremely hard to show, you know, the final stage of it, of how it goes out, and partly because there is no sort of common approach or real cooperation across borders to actually follow the trail. I mean, I just mentioned by anecdote talking to some Swiss prosecutors, you know, talking about some of the allegations that happened in Ukraine after the fall of Yanukovych. And you know, they read all this stuff and they say, well, where are the requests? Where are the requests from Ukraine, you know, that we can investigate? Because a lot of times, a lot of public statements made, and the journalists find great stuff, but unless that's backed up, unless there's pressure not only to expose this stuff, but actually pressure on the authorities to efficiently investigate and file the requests and actually do these things, it has to be done in a legal way, then nothing will happen, and the trail tends to go cold. And it's a really big topic about how we can, you know, as journalists, try to span all these borders and actually follow the money all the way through to how it actually is spent.
I had two questions. First of all, when the economic sanctions after Crimea started to appear, the Western governments were criticized for seeming to make up these lists of economic sanctions based on what was published in the media or what was published by some Russian dissidents. So what was your impression? Do the Western government's officials or intelligence agency actually have any better knowledge of this than you do? And the second question I have is, after Crimea especially, there has been a lot of talk about this Siloviks that actually made the decision of going to Ukraine and so on. Did you find connections how these people who run sort of the money business and these hardliners who run the foreign policy or so-called how does it work between, say, Sergei Ivanov and people like that and these people who run the different agencies and companies?
Well, I'll let Roman talk, but I just think we have to be a little bit careful about, you know, going beyond the evidence we have. We try to document things very carefully and make accusations based on what we can prove. So, you know, you can. It's not easy to connect this. Yeah, I would say that Western agencies, you know, have to back up the evidence they make. I mean, for example, the U.S. Treasury announced that Putin had a personal stake in Gunvor. Well, we wait to see the evidence. I have the impression that Western agencies read Nova Gazeta very thoroughly, you know.
But we never said that he has personal stake. We just said that, you know, he is connected, which is different.
I'm sure that they do have all kinds of pieces of evidence, but we can't judge, you know, information coming from anonymous sources, and you can speculate about some of the patterns of influence. You know, what does Firtash do with his money? You can speculate, but the truth is that a lot of that is speculation, and it has remained to be proven. And he will deny that, you know, and he will say that I'm just a businessman making a lot of money. That's my job to make lots of money, you know.
Okay, I think that this is the last question.
I am Hasuduan Sirait from Alliance of Independent Journalists from Indonesia. you reveal a very interesting story. Of course, it's very dangerous to work out this project. My question is, what kind of risk you face after publish this story? As you know, Putin administration is very strong.
I just couldn't hear the question. Did you get it?
It's what kind of risk do you face after publishing this kind of story?
Well,
That's about personal security, probably.
well, well, of course, for after some of the stories, you know, we are under pressure, and it's. I mean, we see it in different ways. I mean, sometimes we are followed, my emails are hacked, my phone is taped, but the best option, I mean, the only recipe, you know, is that if you feel the threat, you leave the country. So that is why, you know, I like to publish the story and the next day I am somewhere in Egypt. That's, you know, the best way to deal with this threat. And then in 2 weeks you come back.
And other measures we weren't going to. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and you face the problem with your phone and with your private accounts and...
yeah, my email was hacked. I mean, they cloned my SIM card and hacked with my cloned SIM card the email.
That is the consequences of escaping of the country.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, I want to thank these two guys for the great stories, and I believe that this is not the end of the stories. You will follow up. And I want to thank everybody. Thank you for coming and for your questions. We are wrapping up. Thank you. Bye-bye.